First question, what I want to ask is what is to be a citizen of the world?
Yes. Well, world citizenship means that an individual gives their, you could say, allegiance, or is aware at least of their rights and duties as part of humanity and as part of planet Earth, because each of us in microcosm, as a human being, are representative of humanity as a whole, and our home is really planet Earth, right?
Yeah.
So all citizenship actually is based upon two legal principles. The first one, jus soli, and this is Latin, and I'll explain it in a minute. And the second is jus sanguinis. Jus soli means the right of the earth. Jus sanguinis means the right of the blood. So for some countries, like here in the United States, you could either be born on the land, so to speak, born in Illinois or New York or something. Born on the land, you're considered a citizen. That's jus soli. Jus sanguinis means if you're born of parents who may be on a ship on a or something in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, but not so-called U.S. territory, that child will still be considered a U.S. citizen because of jus sanguinis. The parents have U.S. citizenship, so the child also. Now, there are some countries that only allow for jus sanguinis, meaning it doesn't matter if you're born on the land, you may only be considered a citizen if you have parents, or sometimes even grand or great-grandparents, who have the so-called blood of that nationality or citizenship. So how is world citizenship different from the national citizenship? Well, world citizenship, you might say every human being is already a world citizen of the world. Either term is fine to use. By the fact that we are born on planet Earth of human parents. So under the two same principles, jus soli and jus sanguinis, jus soli, meaning the right of the land, we're all born on the land, which is planet Earth, and we're all born of human parents. That makes us world citizens automatically. So in the end, we are giving our allegiance to humanity and the Earth, because the Earth is our parent, and humanity is also our family, you might say, our brothers and sisters. We are pledging our allegiance to each other, and understanding that we have universal rights as well as duties that should be respected. Whereas a national citizen, their rights may actually end at the border. If you want to do something, and your government says you can't, either you might not be able to do it within a country, and you might have to leave to be able to do that. That might be exercising your right to freedom of expression. Some countries restrict that dramatically. It might be maybe practicing a particular religious faith, that who knows what it might be. So in certain places, and this is why oftentimes there are refugees, when you discount, environmental situations or that are forcing people off their land because it's going underwater, if it's more like a political issue that someone is against the government, or the government has persecuted them because of a specific thing that the individual wants to do or has done, whether it's their religion or their speech or political standpoint, they might have to leave that government or that place to exercise their rights. Whereas what we're saying is you have universal rights, which should be universally respected, no matter where you are on planet Earth. And actually, we have a project which is to establish world citizenship as a valid additional citizenship to anyone that citizenship that a person may or even may not have. And I don't know if you're aware of this, but there's at least, the UN says that there's probably a lot more, 10 million stateless people, meaning individuals like you've probably heard of the Rohingya refugees who were fleeing from Burma to go to Bangladesh just to save their lives because their villages were being torched, right? They're considered stateless because the government of that country, of Burma or Myanmar, did not want to identify them. They don't agree with either their religion or their culture, whatever it might be, and so they have not identified them. And there's other governments like that too. There's a great book called Cosmopolites, and I would encourage your watchers here, your listeners, to check out the book called Cosmopolites, The Coming of the Global Citizen. It's written by a woman named Atusa Araxia Abrahamian, and I can always email you that in case you have listeners who want to know exactly, but that you can find it on Amazon. A great book that talks about citizenship, in fact, a path towards world citizenship, you might say, and there's a whole chapter on Gary Davis, the founder of World Service Authority, where I work, and what world citizenship meant to him and in his life. But the reason I bring up that book is she went to the Comoros Islands to find out why there are Comoros citizens who aren't even living in Comoros Islands, but who are living in United Arab Emirates, a whole I'd say continent away. And because the government of the UAE doesn't want to give certain people called the Badoon living on their land, they don't want to give them citizenship, because of course being a citizen in an especially wealthy country like that means you get a lot of great benefits, not just your rights respected, but even more than you might say some fundamental rights respected, with education, with healthcare, etc. And they don't want to have to provide that to these people who they don't really want in their so-called country, you might say. So they've purchased them Comoros citizenship so that at least they'll have something and not be considered stateless. But those people aren't going to Comoros. What are they going to be going there for? They've never been there. They don't know anything about it. Their family or culture or language isn't there. So anyway, it's interesting how citizenship there's something. It's not just citizenship like jus soli and jus sanguinis, but there's something called jus pecuniae, which is meaning the purchase or sale of citizenship nowadays, which I'm sure you and your listeners have heard of. But that's what world citizenship is. The bottom line is we're seeing each other as if we're related. We're cousins, right? We're all part of this one human family. We should be working together.
Okay, and if we take these days, how many people have a world passport nowadays?
Yeah, right. Well, so since we've been in existence, which is 1954 when World Service Authority was founded, we have issued close to 5 million documents in total, meaning the passport, ID cards, birth certificates, world citizen card and certificates, registering people as world citizens officially, legally, and politically, issuing an exit visa and a residence permit in world passports. We have provided world marriage certificates, multiple different documents. And of those documents, about 750,000 are world passport holders. Now, of course, some of the people who got the world passport back in 1954 are no longer alive. But of course, new people every day are applying for the world passport from all over the world. So I would still say we're somewhere between 750,000 and 1 million passport holders, which is a pretty small number when you compare it to a national government like the United States government. I think issues approximately 15 million passports, or they were recently, a year, which is a dramatically bigger number. And so, of course, one of the things we are always hoping to do is to expand issuance to more and more people. But one of the things we also do is provide for refugees in refugee camps, at least, is to as many as we can, free documents. Or if someone gets a sponsor, then the refugee doesn't have to pay, the person doesn't have to pay, but they might get a church or some non-governmental organization to sponsor their issuance fees. Or, like I said, we also provide a certain percentage of documents for free to refugees because we know that they can't work and have no funds.
Okay, I try to ask some people in Russia about what they know about world passport, and actually they didn't know anything about this passport. And what do you think? How many Russian people apply for world citizenship?
There were a lot of Russian applicants in the 1990s, and I think that was due to the fact that the Soviet Union had just really disintegrated, and certain governments, including the Russian government, really didn't immediately have the capacity to issue passports. In fact, you probably find this interesting, but the former president of Lithuania, Vytautas Landsbergis, the first passport that he had after Lithuania became free again was the world passport. In fact, he used it to go to events at the UN and other parts of the world until, of course, his government could create its own. So we had a lot of issuance. I mean, thousands and thousands of Russians during the 1990s would get it. And of course, once though, I guess you would say what used to be called the newly independent states, including Russia, sort of became more firmly entrenched over the years. And certainly now, their government has easily the capacity to issue as many passports as it needs to its citizens. So because the need maybe is less, there are fewer people. It's more like hundreds of every year of Russians rather than thousands every year. So I don't know what the grand total is. We don't really we're so busy, as a smaller human rights organization, trying to keep up with the demand that is current, that we don't. We don't advertise, and that's also another reason why people in Russia may not know about it, because we do not, advertise in Izvestia or Pravda or whatever. So people may not be aware of it because of that. And occasionally we've had people on staff over the years who've spoken Russian, and we do have a small amount of information in Russian. But even though I think our most recent application form is not actually translated into Russian, which it needs to be. So there's some of those issues that are language and maybe economic issues that have impacted why there may have been a decline in the amount of population of people who happen to be in Russia or even in Eastern Europe who have not gotten the passport as much lately.
Yeah. If we take famous people as Barack Obama, Oprah Winfrey, Edward Snowden, who else of famous people have a world passport?
Right. Well, so we try to issue documents to famous people. Some famous people come to us on their own to get the documents. So actors, for example. And so, of course, most of those people want to maintain their privacy. We don't. I mean, one of the most famous ones recently is a singer, a hip hop artist, and actor named Yasin Bey. But most people know of him by the name of Mos Def, was his stage name. And he has the world passport, someone relatively famous. But we have a list. I have a list which you can't really see in the camera here, but a list of a whole bunch of people, not just actors, not just singers, but oftentimes politicians or political figures, or even sometimes religious figures like the Dalai Lama. The Dalai Lama from Tibet, he has a world passport.
Wow.
Let me look at the list. There's Nobel Prize winners like you probably are familiar with Andrei Sakharov or Alexander Solzhenitsyn. These people were issued world passports. Archbishop Desmond Tutu was issued a world passport. And then some political leaders, who we felt was important to either thank them, like when it came to President Obama, in 2 different speeches in Berlin, he mentioned that he was not only an American, but also a citizen of the world. And to have him as a national president, to recognize his global or world citizenship status was really important, I thought, while the world was watching. And Gary Davis thought also. And that's why we issued him a world passport. So, I mean, running down the list, I can tell you, like, for example, there are mayors of cities that we've issued to over the years. Like there was a mayor of Moscow named Gavril Popov. I mean, that's a while back. But he had been issued a world passport, as well as other mayors. Like former president of Haiti, Jean-Bertrand Aristide, was issued a world passport. Eleanor Roosevelt, the first lady of the United States under Franklin Roosevelt, she was issued a world passport. And then famous people over the years, many different famous people, some who are no longer alive, but we continue to add to this list. Like George Clooney, the actor, Isaac Asimov, who was a well-known science fiction writer. Ai Weiwei, if you know him, he was a Chinese dissident. Now he's an artist. He's also produced a new film. What's that film called? I can't remember what it's called, but it's about refugees, and it's a wonderful film. Nicole Kidman, who's an actor, you may know of her. Who else? Mordecai Vanunu, a nuclear scientist, of course, like you said, Oprah Winfrey, and these are just to name a few. In fact, recently there was an event out in California where I think the former president of Ecuador, we issued her a world passport, and there was a couple other officials and I can't remember, I think one from Ghana and two others from other countries who we issued, who are like finance ministers or other higher level echelon individuals. We issued those documents through our World Stateless Persons Commissioner, who is an individual who lives out in near Los Angeles in California, and he had a big event where some of these dignitaries were coming. So, once again, it's important for us to, in an honorary way, to give world passports to people like Nobel Prize winners or other people who are doing things for humanity, and that's why we do it.
David, is it true that Ecuador was the first country which recognized world citizenship?
Well, what's really interesting. If you read their constitution, near the end of the constitution, it actually mentions that Ecuador could see itself as part of a world state with world citizenship as a guiding principle. So not only has that government over the years recognized the world passport, but they also recognize the idea of world citizenship, and I could see them becoming part of like a, you might say a federation of all the countries in the Americas as maybe one first step to a federation of the entire world. So, of course, our goal, claiming this world citizen government status now, is to say, well, it's already been done. Everyone just has to sort of join right now. We don't have to create a new world governmental system. It already exists. People just need to join, accept the fact that we are all on one planet, that it's our only home. It's like we're on a ship, traveling through space. The Earth is our ship, and we need to protect it, or we're going to die. Or if we fight each other and it ends up in a nuclear war, then we could also die from the nuclear fallout. So the point is to steer our ship, the Earth and humanity, in the direction of peaceful activities, in the direction of what Buckminster Fuller, an eminent scientist, said, into livingry, not weaponry. Because, I mean, what can a gun and certainly what can a nuclear bomb do? All it can do is kill, right? It can't do anything to help us. I mean, whereas a knife, legitimately, you could cut up your dinner salad to eat dinner. And so a knife has a good purpose. I mean, yes, a knife could harm somebody too, but it has a very good purpose. Whereas a nuclear bomb has no good purpose, right? I mean, all it can do is destroy. I mean, let me put it this way. I always think like a lawyer because I'm a human rights lawyer. The only time potentially that a nuclear bomb might be useful is if there's an asteroid heading towards Earth. And maybe if we shoot out a nuclear bomb at it and put it off course so it doesn't hit Earth, that may be the only one example that I can think of where a nuclear bomb might be helpful, as long as we know that the fallout from that, bombing the asteroid wouldn't come back to Earth.
Yeah. And David, I want to ask one more important for me question,
Sure.
and for many people who talk with me. What benefits person will get with world passport?
Right. Well, so we actually have a document, which I think it's quicker if I look at the document and tell you what it actually says, and I can show it here sort of quickly. It's the differences between the world passport and the national passport. But I can tell you one of the main differences that people find with the world passport versus the national passport, and why people want to get it, is because the world passport affirms your innate and unalienable human right to travel and to identification. And there are many people, as we've discussed already earlier in our conversation, whose fundamental human rights are not being respected, who can't properly identify themselves because they don't even have a birth certificate, and they maybe can't get one because they've been discriminated against. And there's people who are persecuted who can't get a passport from the government that has persecuted them, or don't want to get a passport from the government that has harmed them, right? So for them, the world passport may be the only tool that they can use to claim their fundamental human rights to whatever it is, to travel, to identify themselves, to work, to residence, to education, to healthcare, whatever human right it might be. So the world passport, because it is a global document of identification and travel, affirms our fundamental human rights, whereas the national passport only affirms a civic privilege. Let me explain that. We are saying that the world passport, and here's what it looks like. This is a sample of the world passport, that it affirms your fundamental human rights no matter where you are on planet Earth, no matter whether you have a state or national citizenship or not. Whereas the national passport, national citizenship, means that the national government, if they think you are acting in a subversive way or maybe in a revolutionary way, they might revoke their national passport from you. They might even revoke your citizenship. And then you're left with really having a very difficult time to work and to live and to exercise your fundamental human rights without a document. Nowadays, it seems like no matter what we do, we have to have some kind of document to identify ourselves, whether it's to buy something even in a grocery store, perhaps. So the national passport represents division. It represents just a privilege that a national government would give to someone, saying, okay, you've paid for it, or we agree with you, you can have this document and then you can travel. But what the national government doesn't tell you is that any other national government can actually reject you outright with no valid reason and discriminate against you because they don't like your citizenship or they don't like where you're coming from. And that's the kind of hatred or enmity that national governments set up in the nation state system to pit one government against another. In fact, there are indexes of, the most powerful passport in the world, and that passport might be, from Singapore or some other country where those people can travel to multiple different countries on that passport without having to get a visa, right? Well, no one should have to get a visa. Having to get a visa actually is a violation of another one of our fundamental human rights that are restated in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. And this is a copy I have in Russian. I also have it in English. So the World Passport is actually a tool that opens up the world for everyone. It's a tool that affirms our fundamental human right to travel and identification, whereas the national passport is really only representing division. So another main difference is you own the world passport, whereas the national passport is owned by the national government. And as I said, they can take it away at any time, whereas no one can legally take a world passport from you. Now, they can illegally take it from you, or of course, if you are harming somebody, obviously, because of course we want to make sure that our fundamental rights are respected. You don't want someone traveling who might be harming somebody. Obviously, do no harm is one of the most important rules of natural law, right? Do no harm, make sure no harm is done, and keep your word. So the world passport could potentially be revoked from somebody if they're harming somebody, obviously. But otherwise, no. If you're simply trying to exercise your right to travel, to go from, say, Moscow to Paris or from St. Petersburg to Beijing, well, then you should just get in your car, get on the train, get in the plane, and go, right? And then you show your and say, hi, I'm here. I'm a human being. I'm not a grizzly bear. I'm not a shark. I'm a human being. I have rights. I'm here. You might have to pay a little fee or fine to cover the costs of your travel, obviously, or even upon your arrival. And that makes sense because you don't want to, cause harm in the new place that you're coming to by not sort of paying your way, obviously. What else? So the World Passport, pretty much almost every human being can get it. There are a few restrictions based upon, what I would call compliance controls due to terrorism or trafficking of weapons of mass destruction or certain watch lists that we, of course, review prior to any document issuance to anyone. So those might be a restriction, and there's certain places in the world that are actually barred, blocked fully, like Cuba and Iran and North Korea. Not that we can't help someone to apply from there. We could, but we would have to get a special license from the U.S. government to do that. And we actually have, on a few occasions, we actually have applied for and received a special license where the person was being persecuted in a certain country and we wanted to help get them out of there. But so most people can apply for the World Passport, whereas most people cannot apply for, say the Russian or the American passport. Only people in Russia who are Russian, or only people in the United States who are United States citizens can apply for those passports. So it's not as inclusive. In fact, the nation state system is exclusive, not inclusive. And that's another problem with the nation state system, is that it can only really affirm rights within their system, within that framework. But human rights are universal. Human rights are inclusive. So a nation state can never really fully respect our fundamental human rights. So that's why we would say it's so important to have a human rights document like the World Passport. Let me tell you other quick things about it. The World Passport is based upon the idea of peace, that we're one human family. It doesn't matter what your religion, your ethnicity, or politics are. You can get it. It can be both a primary and a secondary form of identification. It represents that right to travel and human freedom. Almost 95% of all countries in the world have actually stamped the World Passport, meaning they placed a visa, an entry, or an exit stamp at a border, or they've placed a visa at an embassy or consulate. So it has great recognition, although, of course, it's difficult to use in the wealthiest countries just because those are the most restrictive. What else? So sometimes people like to have it as an additional document because maybe they've already gone someplace in their national passport, and if they've gone that place, a certain other country might not let them in if they've seen the visa in their national passport for that one country. This happens in the Middle East, for example. If you've been to Lebanon, Israel might not let you in. Or you've been to Israel, maybe Palestinian Authority might not want to let you in, right? So because there's that sort of hatred, unfortunately, between groups of people when we're all human. I mean, it doesn't make sense that humans kill humans at all. Anyway, so the World Passport, you don't have any duty or allegiance to any national government or to any affirming any kind of national ideology that you don't like just to have the passport. No, it's affirming human rights, an ideology of human rights. And who doesn't want their human rights respected? Everybody does, at least I would think. So sometimes people are traveling as humanitarians for humanitarian groups, and for them to have the world passport can be useful because certain times, like for Americans, especially in certain parts of the world, it can be dangerous to be known strictly as an American. It could get you killed, unfortunately. So that's why sometimes people traveling for as a journalist or as or an aid worker or something might also want to have in their back pocket the world passport. And one big difference between the national passport and the world passport is that the responsibility of the use of the world passport, it belongs to you, the passport holder, not to World Service Authority and the issuing authority, because once you get that document and it's in your hand, you assume full responsibility for its use. And that's the way it really should be. No government should assume responsibility for someone using their passport who does bad deeds, you might say, right? Those are the main differences between the national passport and the world passport. And we also, I have a lot of flyers, which we can always email to people or mail to people, but we have this other flyer which says various reasons for the public demand. And there's a lot of reasons, some of which I've already touched on together, already, but there's certain reasons. For example, just a quick example for people maybe in Russia. There might be a couple who have been living in Russia their whole life, but they're not ethnically Russian. Maybe they're Estonian or Lithuanian, and the Russian government doesn't want to identify them. What do? Well, they may either have to go back to Estonia, where they've never been, to try to get a document, and then the Estonian government will say, well, you've never lived here, you're Russian, right? They may be stuck. And so people like that, or even children of people like that, might be find themselves in a discriminatory situation, and the world passport may be the only tool in the world that they can get, other than potentially a refugee travel document that national governments do not issue very frequently, and it's difficult to get. So, for many people, the world passport may be the only tool in the world that they can use to try to claim their rights.
Yeah. And about question, who can apply for world passport?
Sure. Well, so a long time ago, we used to be able to say the main criterion for applying for a world passport is that you have to be a human being. It's kind of funny, but believe it or not, there have been people over the years who, because they love their dog or their cat so much, have said, "Could I get a world passport for my dog?" And I'm like, "No, you can't. That's only for humans, beings." But because of restrictions that the U.S. government has placed on either certain people or certain countries, believe it or not, there are certain places in the world, which I mentioned a few minutes ago, like Iran, like Cuba, like North Korea, like for many years, like Sudan or Somalia. We're on list of fully blocked countries, meaning that no individual, no organization, no company, nobody in the United States could actually provide a documentation or service or even send money to people in that country without first getting special permission to do so. Of course, that shows just sort of the lack of diplomacy between those countries. It doesn't necessarily mean that obviously that we don't want to issue to people in those places. Of course, we would like to, because they're human beings too. But of course, there are also people, as I mentioned, who are on certain watch lists, like lists of terrorists or traffickers of weapons of mass destruction or otherwise criminals, and lists that like the Office of Foreign Assets Control maintains, which is part of the U.S. Department of Treasury, or the FBI has a watch list, or Interpol has a watch list. I mean, there's multiple watch lists, and we review all those lists prior, as I said, to providing information and documentation to people around the world. So there have been people, even in the last year, believe it or not, who showed up as we did our research, vetting the applicant, and we realized, oh, we cannot issue to that person. We can do nothing for them because they're on this list. So there are few people in the world, I mean, it's not a big list, who can't get documents because of their past negative behavior or because of where they're currently residing.
And is it true that every person who apply for world passport checked by Interpol?
Well, so we use Interpol is just one of the lists we use. Like I said, it's not the primary one that we might go to if it's a name that we're not sure about, or if there's some extra data that they might have that like the U.S. government might not have. But the main three lists that we use are Office of Foreign Assets Control, specially designated nationals and blocked persons and countries lists, the FBI watch list, and the business business, industry, and security watch list. Those are the three main lists. But like I said, there are other lists, and I'm not going to go into all of them. But Interpol is one of them that we do use, but not on every occasion. That one, because generally, fortunately, because of computer systems and cross-referencing, most likely someone who's on Interpol will also be on the list, or maybe the FBI list. Or is the Bureau of Industry and Security list. So these lists are really comprehensive and cover the world. But like I said, if we're a little bit concerned, or even if a portion of a name might not exactly show up in the OFAC list, then we're going to go to Interpol and check on that. And I have to say, sometimes we will just go to the internet, online and Google somebody, just use a search engine and see what comes up. Because sometimes people may not be on a watch list, but that doesn't mean that they have not committed a crime, or that they may not have done something, a little bit questionable, right? So we do that too. We want to make sure that people who carry this document, one, themselves are upstanding human beings, you might say, and upstanding world citizens. And that they're not going to harm anybody else. But, no government in the world can control what someone does, who they provided a document to. Because today, you could be perfectly sane, perfectly normal, a perfectly happy person. Tomorrow, something could go off in your brain, some chemical reaction causing you to literally have a bout of insanity, right? Causing you to pick up a gun or harm somebody. And of course, the government won't know that. They're not in your mind. They can't. It's not easy to know. You never know in the long run, 5-10 years from now, how someone might behave who's been issued a national passport, the world passport, or any document, even just a driver's license. Someone might today be a great driver, but a week from now they might have some kind of illness causing them not to be able to be successfully driving, but they still might try to drive, and maybe they shouldn't. So we cannot account for all permutations of problems that could potentially come down the line, but we are very secure and aren't concerned about the situation of who's applying, because we do such a good job, I think, of vetting the population of people who apply.
Yeah. David, and how do you see the future of World Citizen?
Sure. Well, the long-term goal of this organization, you might say, to put it in one vision statement, is world peace through world law. Okay? But world law certainly entails the idea of citizenship, because if you have law, then you have citizenship, and then you have government. Will you have peace? Maybe like in a national framework, if you meet with some people in a town and you say, okay, let's establish some laws. You establish those laws. You say, well, okay, well, now we have some common laws that makes us sort of common citizens of this town or this nation. And then you establish a government, because you say, well, we might get into some arguments, okay, about how this law actually applies in real life. So why don't we create some representative institutions? Because I'm going to be off on the farm. You're going to be in town. I want you to represent me and take maybe take my viewpoint to town and discuss what I need to be a better farmer, or whatever it is, to town, and discuss it, because I can't come every day. I've got to tend to the crops, right? So you create a government, and hopefully that leads to peace. So national law with national citizenship and a national government generally leads to national peace, right? Although we've seen sad, horrible, frightening examples like Syria, where there's an internal war that has become sort of globalized because of the different players who are putting in money and tanks and warplanes and all into it. But it's certainly, most international law or international affairs people would probably say it's an internal war. It's not yet an international war. But so it does even occur that you don't always have national peace, even if you have national law and national citizenship and government. So what we say, though, is can national law, national citizenship, and national government lead to world peace? And I would say no, it can't in the long run. And that's why we've had more than 200 wars, probably almost 300 wars, since the UN was founded to rid the world of the scourge of war. It hasn't done the job that it was founded to do. That's because the nation states themselves won't let it, especially the 5 permanent members of the UN Security Council, who don't want it to do anything. They want to maintain their so-called national sovereignty and control over everything as much as they can, right? And that's true, as much as true for Russia as it is for the US, as it is for China, Britain, and France, okay? They want as much power as they can. It doesn't matter, right? They're all power hungry and power, grubby. So the point is, if you have world law and world citizenship with world government institutions like a world parliament, a parliament of humans, a world court of human rights, where individuals could have standing to sue governments and corporations who were violating their rights, with some kind of maybe world executive council and world sustainable development council, whatever it might be, then we should be able to get to world peace, because national citizenship and national law has not led to world peace. But this is why we're positing the idea that we're going to get structure, because right now the earth is not governed. It has no brain. So this is why it's all over the place. It's not working. It's not functional because it has no brain. But a world government would be the brain of humanity, at least for the earth. And the earth, of course, can't really speak for itself, but it's certainly speaking out. And why is it? How is it speaking out? It's speaking out in earthquakes. It's speaking out in hurricanes. It's speaking out in flooding. Waters rising. It's speaking out in giving us cancer, human beings cancer, because we're killing the planet. So it's trying to kill us back, right? So we need to be good stewards of the planet. We don't own planet Earth. In fact, it owns us. So the ultimate goal of World Service Authority and world citizenship is to establish those different levels of law, citizenship, government, which will in the end lead to world peace. And let me just tell you, because it's dear to my heart, the sort of the basic reason why this organization even exists. There was a man named Gary Davis, and he has a book here. I'll get it back here, called My Country is the World. Okay. In fact, there's even a new documentary out called The World is My Country about Gary Davis, where he tells his story. But the reason why this organization, World Service Authority, by the way, our website is worldservice.org, exists. The reason why do we exist is to really to outlaw war, you might say. Why is that? Well, because Gary Davis, he was a Broadway actor. He was a comedian. He was a very happy human being. But right at the beginning of World War II, his older brother Bud was conscripted into the Navy. Okay, and not long into the war, his brother's battleship was bombed, completely destroyed. His brother was killed. This was, to Gary, this was so sad. It was so depressing. He almost didn't want to live. And he became very angry. He became so angry, he said, I'm going to join the Air Force and I'm going to bomb Hitler's war factories, right? But what changed him was that when he got up in that plane in the sky and he was dropping bombs, he noticed that those bombs were not dropping on, war factories. They were dropping on towns with fellow human beings, with, women and children, men, and he was killing them. He killed people. I mean, that's what is a person in the army paid to do? They're paid to kill, right? Yeah. That's what he did. But when he came back to the United States, he had what was called then, he was shell shocked. But what we would call it now is post-traumatic stress. Okay, that's what he had. And he said, I've got to get out of this war system that made me kill and that killed my brother. So he said, the only way I can think about doing this is giving up my national citizenship, because it's at the national level that people are fighting. Cities aren't fighting. Do you see Moscow fighting Washington, D.C.? Do you see, Beijing fighting Paris? No, they want to, like mayors of those cities want to work together. They want to learn from each other. Sure. It's at that higher level where the killing goes on, where the killing is paid for. So Gary said, I'm out of this system. He went to Paris in May of 1948 with a passport in hand. He renounced his U.S. citizenship at the embassy. And they first said no. And they said, come back a few days later, because his father, who was a wealthy band leader, an orchestra leader, said, don't let him do it. He's just, depressed from the war. And he came back a hero. Anyway, so finally he went back to the embassy 3 days later on May 25th of 1948. And the woman at the embassy said, Mr. Davis, did you change your mind? He's like, no, I want to renounce my citizenship. And so she was trying to convince him not to. But Gary said, look, I've already been here a few days ago. If you don't give me the oath, raise my hand, put my hand on the Bible, and give me the oath of renunciation right now, I'm going to call Washington, D.C., and report you for dereliction of duty, meaning you're not doing your job and you could get fired. And the woman was like, oh my gosh, okay. So she, looked through her desk drawer and found the oath of renunciation, because it's a law in the United States that you are able to renounce your citizenship, actually, legally. So she gave him the oath of renunciation. But the second he stepped out in Paris, he was in France illegally because he had no documents. And that's where this whole story of, his book, My Country is the World, and the movie, the new documentary, The World is My Country, is all about. So I don't want to go into any more of it. I don't want to spoil the book or the movie, because it's a great story. But the whole impetus for world citizens in this 21st century and previously in the 20th century, you might say the modern world citizenship movement is this idea that came from this one man, this one human, who said, I don't want to kill anymore. I don't want to kill anymore, and none of our sons and daughters or anyone, none of our cousins, nobody should kill another human being. And what I like to say, and this is something that I came up with a few years ago, is, why fight and die for a country when you can love and live for humanity and the earth?
Yeah.
And so that's really what this organization is about, is trying to share the idea of loving and living together in a peaceful way, but not just, singing Kumbaya and wish for it, but to really create the institutions of law and the tools of law, like a passport, like an ID, like even world, to affirm our rights, our fundamental universal rights as human beings.
David, thank you very much for our conversation. I think it will be very useful for other people who will view this interview. And thank you for your development, this idea, world citizenship, and I very respect this idea. And thank you for this interview we record today.
Artem, thank you so much for this opportunity to speak to the public through you. And if anyone does want to reach out to us, they can email us at info@worldservice.org. That's the main email. We're happy to send application forms, just basic information. If there are people in need, we also have a legal department, which I didn't mention, by the way, especially refugees or people who might need, for example, a legal brief. What's called an amicus curiae, a friend of the court brief, written on their behalf to support their right to stay in a certain country, for example, because they've fled and now they've found a safe haven, but the government may threaten to deport them, right? So we will, for free, write legal briefs to support people's right, for example, to stay in a country, not necessarily here in the United States, it could be anywhere in the world. To support those fundamental human rights, we draft legal letter writing campaigns, we petition intergovernmental commissions, and that's completely separate from our document issuance of like the passport and the ID. We have, like I said, besides the legal department and our documentation department, we have other departments like our PR and outreach department, which does provide education. We have a group of students who come to our offices here in Washington, D.C. to speak about world citizenship, to give seminars on this, and also we have other projects which I mentioned just briefly, but I'll just once again mention really quick because I think it's so important, and then I'll say goodbye. We have World Court of Human Rights, which we're working on, and I'm working with an attorney and other people in other parts of the world to develop this idea of this World Court of Human Rights, because 60% of the world's population lives in a region of the world which has not even a regional human rights system, and that is Asia. There's no Asian human rights court like there is in Africa or Europe or the Americas, and there needs to be. So up until that time that exists, if we can have a World Court of Human Rights where people could petition for redress, we need it. So that's something that we're desperately working to promote, and we do have a website for that, which is worldcourtofhumanrights.net. But there's also a link to that from our worldservice.org site. But so once again, thank you, Artem, for this wonderful opportunity. Please have your listeners to reach out to me. I'm happy to help.
Thank you very much, David, and have a nice day. See you soon.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Take care. You're welcome. Bye-bye. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.